15 hospitals said no, lawyers shouted yes, and in the middle of all that noise a janitress started to sing. Everything stopped. The head doctor, the cameras, even the beeping monitors seemed to listen. Tell me this. If one quiet voice can freeze a hallway full of power, what's the real currency in this world? It was one of those New York nights when rain makes the windows look like they're crying, when even the rich feel small and the only thing heavier than the air is the fear no one wants to name. Roland Vaughn, 77, sharp jaw, famous signature, a man whose last name used to move stock tickers, lay pale under a VIP blanket, while a head doctor argued policies and capacity and risk, and his attorney fired back with liability and precedent, and you'll see us in court. Shoes squeaked, pens clicked, a camera flash popped like lightning, and then, from a stool by the stretcher, a soft voice pushed through the storm like a warm knife through ice. A lullaby. Not a fancy aria, not a chart topper, just a simple tune someone used to sing to a child who needed sleep more than answers. And the storm went quiet. I wish you could have seen the look on Roland's face. Eyelids, heavy lips dry, a single tear traveling down a cheek that had forgotten what tenderness felt like. The janitress, Nina, small frame, careful hands, the kind of person buildings rely on but never recognize, had her fingers pressed to her ears like the noise hurt, because it did, and singing was her way back to steady. Listen. Sometimes the smallest sound is the strongest thing in the room. You know what I mean. Roland's chart looked like a crossword with no answers, 15 hospitals, 15 maybes, and not a single "we've got you." His kids showed up in expensive coats that didn't know what rain was. Richard, the eldest, shoulders tight, voice firm like a gavel. Veronica, second-born, precision eyeliner, and a mind that could tally percentages while ordering a latte. David, the youngest, eyes soft until they weren't. And Mark Nolan, the attorney. Competent, loyal, the kind of man who can turn a hallway into a courtroom with just his tone. Inside that private room, Roland shrank. The man who'd once signed deals over $1 million lunches couldn't lift a plastic cup without shaking. His birthday came, no balloons, no family laughs, just a nurse who left a small cake with one stubby candle and a little paper matchbook, and he told himself happy birthday in a voice so low it felt like a secret. Then he cried. Not from fear of dying, but from the shame of not being loved. Real talk. That kind of cry is heavier than a diagnosis. Nina worked the early shift because mornings were gentler. Noise stacked up fast for her, too many orders at once, and she'd fold like paper. Not because she was weak, because the world can be loud in ways most of us don't notice. She hummed when she moved, a barely there sound that kept her breathing even, a path laid down one note at a time. People don't see custodians until something's wrong. That night they saw her because her song turned a riot into a chapel. The first time Roland tried walking the hall, he did it quiet, cane in the right hand, pride in the left, hospital gown, flapping like a flag. He moved like the floor might break. Nina saw him before the nurse did, stepped close, steady hands at his elbow. "Sir, slow down, please." Not starstruck, not a fangirl moment, just care, the kind you don't have to buy. The staff rushed in hot. "Back to your room, Mr. Vaughn." And one nurse snapped at Nina like kindness needed clearance. Roland's voice came out thin but sharp. "Enough. I walked out, she helped me." And that's the first time his eyes rested on her, like he was recognizing someone he already knew. By the time his kids came again, the temperature in the room had changed. They stood like board members at a quarterly update. Folders, pens, bullet points. The phrase, "we need clarity," floating like perfume. "Dad, we should talk about control of the company," Richard started. Investors are nervous, Veronica added. David stared at the floor like he could read a different future in the scuff marks. Roland tried to speak father, not CEO. Can you see me, he asked, not the portfolio? Me. The answer was silence. And silence can be cruel. Here's where truth gets messy. Years back, Roland fell for someone he wasn't supposed to. Mildred, the housekeeper, with steady eyes and real laughter. The marriage frayed. Words were said, doors closed, and one night, while he buried himself in a deal he thought would make the ache quieter, his wife had Mildred sent away to a small town that barely had a name on the map. Then the storm came. Not a media storm, a real one. Rain like fists, wind like a scream, bridges ripping away houses, sliding off hillsides like coins off a table. The news said no survivors from the road that led to the house. Bodies lost to water and mud. Grief without a funeral is a story that never stops telling itself. If it were you, what would you have done? Days found a rhythm. Roland asked for Nina the way a tired mind asks for an old song, not logical, necessary. Nurses exchanged looks. He'd talk in the afternoons, not like a king dispensing wisdom, like a man unclenching. I used to move millions with a call, he said, now I can't steady a glass. Nina didn't preach. She handed him the glass, watched him drink, nodded once. That simple yes, you're human, not a headline, did more for him than any IV drip. Pattern interrupt. A small thing matters. Nina carried a heart-shaped pendant in her pocket, scratched up the latch, tired from years of opening and closing. She didn't wear it because the chain was weak. She'd been told her whole life she was a miracle found in floodwater down south. A baby wrapped in a wet blanket drifting on wood. Raised by an older woman who loved hard and never asked for thanks. Sometimes life writes a map you can't read until you're already where it's pointing. The Vaughn kids hated the new math. Their father softer, trusting a custodian. Fear talks in sharp whispers. What if he signs something Richard said? What if she's manipulating him, Veronica said. What if we wake up and watch a stranger walk into our inheritance? Fear makes people cruel and sloppy. The rumors started. Gold digger schemer. Then the setup. A storage room. Boxes of meds. A phone camera already recording. Nina helping, because that's who she is, then bam! The door flies open. Caught in the act, Veronica said, voice too bright. Nina's hands shook so hard she couldn't find a sentence. Do you think that's fair? Administration called a meeting. Director at the head, 2 security guards like bookends. Nina tried to explain, words bumping into each other, and then the door opened again. Roland. Cain. Eyes like thunder. No one accuses her like that, he said, calm and deadly. She's the only person in this building who treated me like a man instead of a machine that prints money. Silence. Real silence. Pattern interrupt. Power looks different when it kneels next to a mop bucket. The lullaby kept visiting, not just in the hall at night, too, the melody looping like a gentle promise. One morning, Nina bent to catch a napkin that had skated off the tray, and the pendant slipped out, tapped the floor, spun in place. Roland saw the engraving and went still. RV. He reached out, closed his fist around it like it could run. Where did you get this? He asked. I've had it forever, she said. I don't know where it came from. He whispered a name to the ceiling. Mildred. And something like color drained from his face. He didn't tell the attorney. He told the one person in the building who listened like it mattered. Dr. Sanders, neurologist, soft voice eyes that could hold your story without trying to fix it before you'd finished. I need a discreet test, Roland said. No family, no lawyers, just truth. The doctor nodded. A lab off-site, 2 swabs, a small room with a flickering light that made everything look like a secret. Nina agreed, because if peace was on the table, she'd at least taste it. Meanwhile, the siblings doubled down because fear doesn't take weekends off. He's confused outside influence, vulnerable adult. They used the right words, like weapons. Mark Nolan kept saying the law like it could be love if you said it enough times. And then the envelope. Dr. Sanders opened it, looked up, let the room breathe. It's a match, he said. 99% probability. The floor tilted. Roland's hand found Nina's like it had been reaching for 22 years. He cried. Not the tidy tear of a man who cares about optics, the messy cry that shakes your shoulders and resets your soul. Twist delivered. The door flew open. The kids' papers, accusations, the whole TV drama. Rigged fake collusion. The doctor didn't flinch. Chain of custody is clean. Independent lab. It stands. By dinner, the city knew. Headlines went for the easy ladder. Billionaire housekeeper, janitor. And the comment sections did what they do. People stared at Nina in the cafeteria like they'd been waiting for a reason to judge. She called her foster mother and cried into a prepaid minutes plan until the voice on the other end said, "Baby, if truth hurts them, that's their ache, not yours." Something else happened. Something medicine has a hard time charting. Roland started getting better. Not cured by a miracle headline, steadied by a human one. Eating more. Sleeping deeper. Words finding their way back to the front of the line. Dr. Sanders ordered the scans people whisper about in hallways, and nothing screamed Alzheimer's or the thing you don't want to Google at 2 a.m. His mind wasn't failing. His heart had been carrying a boulder. Heal the heart, and the body does what it can to follow. You ever seen that? Numbers arguing one thing, eyes telling you another. Stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. That's not clickbait here. That's a promise fulfilled. Roland asked his children to dinner at the house. Long table, tall windows. The chandelier he used to love because it said, "I made it now, just light," showing dust he'd missed. He walked in without the cane, not because he was healed, because he wanted to stand. Nina wore a plain white dress, not a statement, a truth. He didn't sound like a CEO. He sounded like a father trying to speak human. "I broke something I can't fix," he said. "I loved a woman I wasn't supposed to love. I failed the one I promised. I hid in business because business doesn't ask you to apologize. I am sorry." He put 3 envelopes on the table like a man laying down weapons. Transfers complete. Properties. Shares. What belongs to you is yours. Not in exchange for forgiveness, not as PR, because it's right and late. The room changed. Veronica's bravado cracked first. She hugged him like a daughter who remembered being 5 in a kitchen that smelled like pancakes. Richard's apology arrived like a heavy box you set down gently so nothing inside breaks. David put a hand on his father's shoulder and didn't say a word, which can be louder than a speech. Nina went last. "I'm not here to replace your mother," she said, voice small but steady. "I just wanted to know who I am." Yeah, that happened. Business changed too. The next board meeting used to be about margins and multiplication. This one was about meaning. Roland stood up with Nina in the back row, not as a prop, as a compass, and said, "We're shifting a solid slice of earnings into scholarships for kids who work 2 jobs and still show up community clinics for people who choose rent over medicine because they have to, and disaster relief for families who wake up to water where their kitchen used to be. Some clapped, some frowned, some texted their wealth manager under the table. The motion passed. It wasn't a fairy tale after that. Real life never signs those contracts. Nina kept working a while, not because she had to, because a routine is an anchor, and she didn't want to drift. She took night classes, wrote flashcards on the subway, fell asleep with a book on her chest 3 nights a week. The pendant got a new chain. She cried at the jewelry counter quietly, because sometimes metal is memory, and memory is weight and joy at the same time. Roland started walking the garden after dinner. Slow, careful content. And sometimes Nina hummed the lullaby under her breath, and he'd smile with his eyes closed like a man who finally made it home. But here's the part that might sting. Not everyone cheered. Some said it was redemption, the rich man facing his past, the worker finally seen as more than a uniform. Others said it was optics, wealth laundering itself through philanthropy power, rewriting its sins as scholarships while keeping the keys to the gate. What do you think? If a fortune builds clinics, does that heal the harm that fortune once caused? Or is that just a prettier way to balance a moral ledger? If it were you, would you take the scholarship or say no on principle and keep the door closed for the next kid who needs it more? I keep replaying that first moment. A hallway boiling with ego and fear, and a janitress with a song turning it into a sanctuary. We talk about power like it's volume, but maybe it's presence. We talk about illness like it's numbers, but maybe it's also the ache you refuse to name. We talk about justice like it's a verdict, but maybe it's a man saying, "I was wrong," and a woman saying, "I forgive you," and 3 grown children learning how to love their father as a person, not a bank account. So tell me straight. Do you think that's fair, that a custodian becomes a daughter and an heir? Or do you think class lines should hold because order depends on them? Would you have defended Nina in that room when everyone stared? Or would you have kept your head down and said, "It's not my problem. If it were you," the DNA said, what the heart already knew. Would you claim your child in front of the world? Or would you hide behind paperwork and hope the truth got tired? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't hold back. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what you would have done. Tell me if you believe a song can change a room. Hit like if this story hit you somewhere real. Subscribe. If you want more true-hearted, messy human stories like this, and share this with one person who needs to be reminded that love, when it finally decides to tell the truth, can heal a body, a family, and sometimes, if we let it, a whole room full of strangers.